You know, the wildfires burning in Oregon are unprecedented, and in California, they're seeing wildfires unlike anything they've ever seen.
Yeah, there has been debate over whether climate change is playing a role in these wildfires. So joining us this morning to help clear some things up, Fleishman. She's the director of the Oregon Climate Change Research Institute. Erica, good morning.
Good morning.
You know, we've seen this debate kind of intensify in fire season every year. It seems to get a little bit bigger as these fires get bigger. So is climate change playing a role in these wildfires?
It is. It is definitely playing a role. It's not the only factor, but it is a factor.
Okay, and so how is it playing a role, and how does it affect wildfires?
There are a number of things going on. The greatest one this year across the western United States is drought. So the plants are much drier than they often would be at this time of year. And that means that when there is a spark, the spark is able to start a fire that can be quite intense and spreads very rapidly, making it more difficult to fight.
And what are some of the ways, other than a drought, that climate change may be having an impact? Does it have an impact when these fires are actually burning, or is it more so just the conditions being created before a fire starts?
It's both. The droughts are becoming more frequent and longer across the western United States, and that's prolonging the fire season across the West. So fires, sometimes you hear people say that there really is no fire season anymore, that fires can start at any time of the year and be quite destructive at any time of the year. So it does become drier earlier in the year and often persists later in the year. All of that contributes to the risk of large fires.
And you do hear some people say, well, you know, this happens every few years, and it's been happening for hundreds of years. Is that accurate, or it does seem like it's getting worse?
It's true that there have been large fires throughout history. There have been large fires in Western Oregon throughout history. So it's not that any one fire is unprecedented, but the number of fires, the size of fires, the fact that these large fire years are coming back to back, that is extremely unusual. We don't have records of anything like that. So it's not one fire, it's the overall trend, and that is consistent with what climate scientists and vegetation ecologists have been projecting for several decades.
So I'm curious, because we look at obviously the destruction happening with the wildfire itself, where, you know, things are being burned to the ground. But what are some of the ecological changes happening, or some of the long-term effects of just millions of acres of forest burning down as it relates to climate change?
Yeah, there are a number of different things going on. It's not just forests. I mean, certainly in Oregon, we have large fires occurring east of the Cascades. In those areas, there are some non-native invasive plants that contribute to increasing fire likelihood. Because of the more persistent and more frequent droughts, there are drier stands of trees, so those may not recover as well. When over time the precipitation patterns change and temperatures become hotter, it can be more difficult for some plants to regenerate. The effects of a lot of these fires are much more severe for human communities than they are for ecological communities. Although the ecological researchers are trying to better understand the long-term consequences for the places that we rely on for research and or for resources and recreation.
Yeah, I mean, what kinds of changes have you seen since the big Eagle Creek fire in 2017?
I am not up to speed on all of the data coming in from those fire areas. Across the West as a whole, it varies. There can sometimes be very good recovery in areas that have burned that look, people will walk into an area right after a fire, for example, the Rim Fire near Yosemite a couple years ago. I see you showing those photographs. There can be substantial regeneration after a fire in the understory. There are a lot of plants and animals that, in a sense, are waiting for a fire in a metaphoric sense, and they need those fires to be able to regenerate. So there are certain plants and animals that will do very well after fires. It varies a lot from place to place, and again, the greatest consequences are for human communities.
Yeah, it looks like the threat's certainly something we'll continue to deal with in the years to come. Fleishman, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having me.